Precious. Welcome to Low Key with Marlowe V. I'm so glad that you're here, my girl. How you doing today?
Hi. I'm a little nervous, but thank you so much for having me. This is my first podcast interview, whatever,
Oh, awesome.
Before, so just a little bit nervous.
Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into grief work.
Like Marlowe said earlier, my name is Precious, and I'm from New Orleans. So what got me in this work is obviously that I am someone who is living and readapting to life with grief. I lost my mother in 2018, June 17th. We'll never forget that date. And that's how I got here. So I lost my mom, and throughout that process, it was just really difficult for me. It was extremely dark, very, very dark transition. And even though I was dealing with this darkness, even though I felt alone and I didn't know how to deal with grief, in the back of my head, I always thought about others. And so from my very first therapy session, and when I was bawling and sad and angry with the world and with God and with everyone, even in the midst of that, I thought about other people. I'm like, if I'm feeling this way, I can't imagine how others are. Throughout my entire journey, I was looking for some sense of community. So I always was Googling on YouTube, looking for books, looking for something that I can connect to, something that was relatable to me. And I couldn't find anything that really matched my experience. I know that grief is not a one size fits all, that everybody's journey is different, but I was looking for some kind of connection to make me feel normal, to make it feel like what I was experiencing wasn't, so unique to me. And I didn't find it. And so I'm here now to at least talk about it, create that space. I want to make grief something that we're not shunned and doing alone, but we're making sure that we're able to discuss it in the mainstream, in our everyday lives, so that we're not suffering in silence. So I'm here to create what I didn't see, so that I can connect with other people, and other people who maybe have similarities or some parts of my story, they cannot feel alone.
I love that. I love what you said when you said that you want to create something that you didn't have. And that's one of my favorite quotes. It's a woman who once upon a time was in the spiritual community. She has since converted, but she's very well known, Doreen Virtue. And one of my favorite books by her, she said that whenever we look around the world and we see something that we feel is missing, that's our call to be the solution to that problem. So I think that's really dope for you to be there for people in a way that you didn't have support at that time.
I never first saw this for myself, right? And so it's like, all my life, I've been someone who was a helper. And so that's something that I feel very called to do, help others. But I never first saw it being something like this, like, oh, this is a capacity in which that I fulfill that part of me is helping people through grief. I was barely 29. I wasn't even a month into my 29th year when my mom transitioned. So it was not something that I would have ever imagined would be my calling. But as much as I ran from it, I couldn't, I felt like the need to do it. And it took some time, I had to journey and through my own life and my own acceptance and get through it and think about how I wanted to approach it. I'm not the kind of person that just automatically share my story. I'm very private. So it took a lot of courage to get to the point where I was able to feel comfortable to do this. But I do feel led, and I'm intrigued to where this journey will take me. And hopefully I just really want to impact just someone. It don't have to be a large group. It would be great if it's more people, but if I can impact 2 people, I feel fulfilled.
Absolutely. So with you not having something like this when you were going through your journey, what helped you the most on your grief journey?
Oh my gosh. So what helped me the most was therapy. Oh my God, in the beginning, so I had, prior to losing my mom had stage 4 colon cancer. So she was diagnosed in 2016. And at the time I was living in Seattle. Like, so I hadn't been living in New Orleans for 9 years before I moved back. Mm-hmm. So I was living in Seattle, and prior to her transition, I was already in the quest of looking for a therapist just for like my own just life transitions that I was going through. I was really young, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I was real young, but I was feeling like I had a lot of things changing for me as I was getting older. So I was already in the midst of looking for a therapist. But when my mom got sick, just all of my focus went there. And so I went from being like just this very young and free, you know, 25-year-old to being a caregiver of my mom, you know, who prior to her illness was like healthy, normal, like no signs at all that she would have cancer. So I kind of put my needs on the back burner, and I would just went full force into being my mom's caregiver, which honestly took me, that's a whole different grieving process and things that I experienced being a caregiver, and especially at a young age. I just wasn't prepared. The things that I've saw are things that, you know, I feel like no young child should have to see their parent go through. So when my mom transitioned, I knew that I needed help outside of myself, outside of my family, but I was so angry that I wasn't sure that even therapy would help me at the time. I had a lot of, like, when I say anger, I mean like rage that I had. I was just complete darkness, but I was enraged at the time because my mom was so faithful. You know, I thought the Lord would see her through it, you know, all the things. And so when she transitioned, I was enraged, but most of my anger was with God. So I was like, I can't go to therapy like with these feelings. No one's going to want to listen to me. They're going to tell me to pray through it. And so I kind of avoided therapy for a while, and I just excluded myself from everything, from family, from friends. I was just like in a very dark place. And one day I was like at work, because I had eventually had to go back to work and things like that. And a kid said something like, it was so simple. Like a kid was just like, oh, I miss my mommy. You know, normal things that kids say. And I was like, I miss my mommy too. And it like took me out. Like I closed my office door, and I was like crying under my desk for hours straight. Wow. And when I drove home, I just drove home. I was like, I don't care. I was like, whatever happens, happen. And so that moment I knew that I had to do something to get myself out of this hole, because I couldn't do it alone. And that's when I started my search for therapy. And originally it was very, it felt defeating because I didn't find anybody that I felt like I could connect to. Like, when I'm an avid researcher, like heavy. And so I went like on a rabbit hole, like researching the exact perfect match for myself. Right. And that was hard. I was on Black Girls Therapy. I was on Psychology Today. That was my two main sources of research. I went through several people, and I even went to one person. It was awful. And then most of the people that I read about, I wanted a Black woman, because I felt like I wanted somebody who I felt like I can relate to, somebody that looks like me, somebody who maybe can understand some of my struggles. And what I found is that a lot of people was kind of centered around Christianity, or they didn't have grief, like, you know, listed as one of their services. So it was like really hard to find a therapist. And I kept coming across the space. And I was like, yo, she looked too happy. She had this big, beautiful smile. And, you know, I think what also kind of stopped me, it was a resemblance of a past person. It looked like me, of who I was prior to my darkness. I was always bubbly. I was always approachable. I was always like just carefree, see the world from a positive lens. You know, I lived by the quote, everything happens for a reason. So when my mom transitioned, I'm like, this can't be a reason. Like, there's no reason for this. And so I kept seeing that person, and then like, it seemed like the person for me, but I was like, she just looked happy and I'm dark. And my cousin, who also lost her mom before, she's like, hey, look, this is my therapist. And I was like, hey, I've been seeing her like all the time on everything. I'm like, she's aligned with me, but I'm like, the picture.
Right.
She was like, that's the same way I felt. So I reached out, and it ended up being a perfect match. And literally it helped start to my journey. It wasn't like an automatic light bulb things was about to get easier. No, not at all. It probably became even more complex, having to really dig deep and dive in. And I think what was really strange for me is how, because I don't like to put a thing on time. Like, I'm not a huge time person, but I think I was very shocked at how quickly I was processing my mom's death. Because I was like, one, you could have never told me I would lose my mom. So just that thought alone, one.
Absolutely.
If I thought I would have lost my mom, I was like, there's no way I will like ever, be able to work through that. And so having that nightmare happen, and then being in that situation, I was very shocked at how I was responding and processing it. Although it was hard and dark and it took a lot of work, I accepted it sooner than I thought I would. And so I thought that was strange, but it didn't take away all of the different steps and rages and moments that I've had with grief. And I'm still dealing with grief, because something about when I talk about normalizing grief and sharing it and talking about it in public spaces is that we are living with grief. Like grief isn't over after the funeral. Grief isn't over after a month or two. I am forever going to be impacted by my mom's loss, and I'm forever living with grief every day, and different things can come up and happen. That may look different. I have great days. I have bad moments. I have good moments, but it is a journey that I will forever live on. And it is a part of me. It's not my identity, but it's a huge part of who I am and how I live my life now.
So sorry to interrupt you guys while you're listening to the show, but I wanted to tell you guys about our new partnership with BetterHelp. If you haven't heard of them, it's an online resource in which you can find your very own friendly local neighborhood therapist, no matter where you are in the world. You sign up, and within 24 hours, they match you with a therapist that's right for you. And you can talk to your counselor every week via phone or video chat. You can also text them between sessions. If you or someone you know has been considering therapy, get started today with BetterHelp. Now let's get back to the show. Have you found with a lot of people that you work with, that rage that you felt, have you found that that's completely normal in the process?
Yes. And every time that I talk about it, you can see the lift off of their shoulders, feeling like, oh, it's not just me. And, I don't want to use the word disappointing, but it's very unfortunate that people don't talk about that rage, Right. It's not something that you hear about when we're discussing grief. We always talk about grief with the emotion of sadness, or happiness, because it depends on, you celebrate the person's life regardless of how short or how long they were able to live. It's still a celebration to celebrate their life that they live. So, you talk about it from an emotion of sadness or emotion of celebration and joy. But we never talk about that anger or that, that to me, like that enrage or darkness that comes along with it. And so I was unprepared. I mean, you're unprepared anyway, but I think I was extremely unprepared for the emotions, the grief of the future as well. So everything that came along with that. And I think that's why my anger lasted so long. And sometimes I still get upset is because of just the future that I assumed would be there. You kind of go through life, you don't talk about, or at least in my family, I don't want to generalize anybody, but in my family, we didn't talk about death as something that would happen. We just didn't. Like, we knew that eventually everybody must transition on, but we never talked about it. And most of the examples in my family, when people do transition, they're much older. So I said in like one of my therapy sessions, and that's how I felt, it was like a death to a fairy tale. And to me, I never even thought having a parent alive was a fairy tale until it was no longer there. And I'm like, wow. And how many people are so experiencing this how as well? And you're like, wow, this is something that you're unprepared for. And it brings so much heartbreak that sometimes it's hard to describe unless somebody has experienced it.
Absolutely. And I think that's an important point that you brought up, is the grief of the future. And I think therapeutically, like as a therapist myself, I think that that's an important point to highlight to everyone out there who's listening, who may be grieving. is a lot of times something that's not considered is that grieving the future.
Yeah. And it's so complex. You know, for me, I grieved my interactions and my my interactions with my mom in the future. So the things that I was missing because, again, like I said, I was really young when my mom transitioned. So I still haven't had kids yet. You know, I got married or any of these things. So for me, it was like, I'm grieving the fact that my mom would never see me get married. My mom won't be there for me in a delivery room and be able to meet her grandkids. My mom would not be physically in my children's lives. Right. That is a very hard pill to swallow. It's something that I still haven't swallowed. And I've literally, within the last probably 6 months to a year, not even a year, less than a year, have moved on to say that I want to have a family. So immediately when my mom transitioned, I was like, I don't want a family, because just the pain of not having her there was a lot, and the pain of having to explain this to my kids, and the pain of that, just normal things that I won't be able to experience, like small things like Grandparents' Day, you know, or being able to share that I'm pregnant, or for my mom to just be there, you know, during those hard, tough times. And so you grieve the future, then you get angry that you won't be able to experience it. Then you get even more angry when you're like, well, how am I going to even get through it if I decide to do it? So it's like, it's so many complexities of it. And I also grieved my mother's future for herself. My mom didn't get to see 50. That's something big for me. I'm like, wow, like 50 seems like a normal age for someone to grow old to, you know, life expectancy wise. The average age is higher than 50. So of course, in my head, I assume my mom would be 50. So the fact that my mom didn't get to see 48, 49, 50, you know, it's crazy to me. And immediately, that's why I got upset about others. It's not about others. Because I'm like, some parents didn't get to see, you know, 18, 20. You know, some people didn't get to experience their parents ever in their lives at all. Or, you know, they didn't get their parent to help them ride a bike, you know, see them at prom. And so it gets frustrating because you think, why me? You know, that was the biggest part of my grief, especially in the beginning. And sometimes I still feel that way, but you get that why me kind of, and it's very draining, but you're like, why me? Why me? Why me? And there's no explanation beyond that. This is part of your journey, unfortunately, and how you decide to live with it shows, I guess. It's just part of your journey. I guess there's no truer way to say it, because it's I can't answer why me. Right. It's just what happened. You know?
It's a part of your story.
Yeah.
And would you say that to anyone out there that's suffering with grief, or specifically the loss of a parent, do you feel that therapy is a necessity, or do you feel it's possible to process your grief without ever going to therapy?
I guess I will have to speak in an I statement for that one, because it is hard to put my experience and my beliefs on other people. But what I will say is that for me, I don't think that I could have gotten myself out of grief without therapy. For me, I don't, you know, I say this, I don't like to say this because I know, especially how words are misconstrued and how things look right now, but I had suicidal thoughts, never attempts, but in a way you could say it was an action when I would get in the car and say, I don't care how I get home. I don't know. Like, it was many nights. I don't know how I got home. You know, it was so many days, probably for like at least almost 8 months, where I was angry every day that I woke up in the morning, every single day. And I would wake up and say, why am I alive? Why do you keep waking me up? I don't want to be here. And so I never acted on it, but these thoughts, these things that I had to deal with, I don't think that I would have been able to do it on my own. I lost my mom in June, and I began therapy in November. So I had a gap, and that gap was rough. And things did get better. I was a person that went to therapy once a week. That's how much I needed it. I let you know.
Right.
That for me, it was real.
Right.
I needed guidance. I needed support. For me, therapy, I was blessed to have a therapist that I truly connected with, and I felt open, where I can completely be myself. I'm in therapy cussing, I'm in therapy screaming, I'm in therapy crying, but I'm also in therapy laughing, feeling like I felt seen. And although I had so many supportive friends and family, and I couldn't have got through that without them as well, but I didn't feel that connection with them at the time. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just how I felt at the time, is that I couldn't connect with them, even for people, because I have a really close friend who also lost her mom. And even then I still felt like I was alone and I was by myself, even at the time, and knowing that she went through this as well. In that exact moment in the beginning of my grief journey, it was just so dark that I couldn't see clearly. Like I couldn't. So even though my family and friends wanted to support me, I wasn't accepting that support. So I needed therapy because that was the only outlet that I had at that time to express myself, even when it didn't make sense, even when it sounds dark, even when it sounds ungrateful, all of those things. Because at the end of the day, I'm aware of my privilege that I did have my mom for 28 years, and that some people don't get that. So I am extremely grateful for that, and I don't take that for granted at all, because I know that even though this is dark for me, and even though for me that was very young to lose my mom and only have 28 years, some people didn't experience 28 years. Some people didn't get 1 year. So I'm very mindful of that. But in therapy, I can't express all the emotions and range of emotions that I was feeling, whether it sounds politically correct or not, I just was able to kind of let it all out.
Right. In a safe space. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to kind of double back to what you were saying a little bit earlier about selecting a therapist, because that's something a lot of people don't know, is the thought of, we'll pick a therapist because sometimes we think about superficial stuff. It's like, oh, we want them to look like us. Maybe some people may not care, but it's just like, oh, they're a therapist. That's good enough. And I always tell people that's not good enough. Like, you literally actually want to like your therapist, because if you do not like them, it's going to be very difficult to build that bond that you need to have that experience. Like you said, you had that. It's a safe space. You can come in, kick your shoes off. You can, say whatever. There's no judgment. And you're looking at another face where you feel that resonance and you feel that support and that connection. So that's absolutely important.
Yeah, I think what kind of bothers me with the idea of people not having access to things like that. Again, I'm privileged enough that I was able to afford therapy. I had the opportunity to go to therapy once a week. So I know that a part of my journey, in the way that I'm processing, in the way that I'm able to handle this, to even have this group, is because of the things that I was privileged enough to have. And so some people don't have access to therapy. Some people don't even have the luxury of being as selective as I was able to do, with picking someone that looked like them, with having the resources and the time to do the researching on it, with going to therapists and being like, yeah, this is not it, and choosing and feeling comfortable enough to say this isn't going to work for me. So I know that my experience feels unique, and that kind of makes me sad, because I wish that therapy was more accessible, where my experience will not be unique, but something that everybody feel like they can be able to access and have. But I know that a lot of pieces went into how aligned for me to be able to be here and have the experience that I had. And so what I would tell people to do is, if you have that luxury, because we got to keep it real, therapy is a luxury at this point, because it's not accessible for everybody, which is very, very sad. And so if you have that luxury, to be selective and pick a therapist, take your time, trust yourself, So nobody knows you and what you need more than you. So for me, it was a very personal, individual experience. I literally couldn't have got through, like I lived for my therapy days. I was like, all right, just let me get through. So I
I love clients like that.
So I feel very lucky. But if you are somebody who don't have that privilege, this is the reason why I created this group. And this is the reason why it's available every week. Despite how I may be feeling that week or whatever, it's because I know that everybody don't have the luxury and the access to go to a therapist. Everybody isn't ready for a therapist. As well, because to me, what I've learned in my experience with therapy as well is that you have to be ready, 1, to go to therapy, 2, to do the work, and 3, to look deep into yourself. So I found out lots of things through therapy. I accepted and processed things probably at a level where if I say it right now, I might sound like a crazy person. But I'm grateful for my own experience. And I know that my experience is my unique experience. But I was able to really separate my mom's journey and my journey. And I think if it wasn't for therapy, I wouldn't have been able to separate the two. And I probably wouldn't be in a sense of healing with an ING, because I don't believe in heal with an ET. We always progress, we will always evolve, all right?
Right.
I don't think I would be in this process of healing if it wasn't for therapy, where I would have separated the two. Because I know for a fact the mindset that I was in, that I didn't look at my mom's journey as her own. I was only processing her transition from how I felt and from how I feel and from my future. So through therapy, I was able to work through some of those things and accept it and look at it from a different lens, which have allowed me to be in the space that I'm in today.
And I wanted to ask, what advice would you give to friends or partners of someone who has lost a parent? Because I know that's a tough spot to be in. Even my own clients sometimes have shared of their spouses or partners or best friends aren't really sure what to say, what to do, how to really respond. What advice would you give to someone in that position?
This is a big one. So I think if I'm thinking from the top of my head, just speaking again, y'all, this is it's me.
Right.
My thoughts. The first thing that I would say to a loved one, a friend, family member, to give the person that's grieving grace. Okay. That is honestly the number one thing that you can do first, is give them grace, because they are processing a lot of complexities at one time that although you may feel like you can relate to, you cannot, because everybody process things differently. Everybody accept and work through things differently. And so allowing that person, giving that person some grace, which means that, hey, they may not always respond to your text message. Don't take it personal. Don't take it as, oh, they don't want to talk to somebody, I'm not going to respond anymore. They may not always answer your call. You may see them on Instagram, but they ignored your call. That's okay. And they have every right to do that. And so, give them grace and, take a step back and try to look at it from their perspective and their view. So they are processing lots of things. They're getting through the day in the best ways that they can. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. Yes, you're going to see them happy sometimes, sad sometimes, depressed sometimes, angry sometimes. That's grief. So allow them to feel and go through all of those complexities without putting any judgment on them. And so a lot of people who are grieving, what I hear and what I've experienced is we feel judged a lot. We feel misunderstood. We feel alone. And I think a lot of that is because of the lack of grace, and then also just, miscommunication and things like that along the lines, because most people that are grieving, this is just from what I've heard from myself, they also don't know how to express what they need. So it may be hard, maybe ask them more than once, maybe just suggest and think about things that they like. So instead of like calling them every day and say what's going on, if you know that they like ice cream, surprise them with some ice cream, That's
awesome. Yeah.
If you don't have the words to say, give them a book, just in the heart, just let them know that you're in their thoughts. I think something that enraged me the most, and again, I was just very angry. So I think I just like to preface that all the time. Because it's real, I was really enraged. I really dislike when people said, I know what you're going through. And although I know that that was not coming from a negative space, that they meant well, I received it negatively. And so I think even when you hear me talk, I say I statements, I like to always bring it back to this is my point of view, this is how I feel, or these are things I've heard others have said to me as well. We have to be mindful that everybody experiences different. So even if you lost a grandparent or you lost an uncle or sister or brother or something, it doesn't reflect completely what that other person is going through. So I think to, kind of stay away from things like that, and then just say things like, I'm thinking about you. I have you in my thoughts. My heart breaks for you. Please let me know if there's anything I can do. What makes you happy? What is something that you would like to put a smile on your face today? Rearranging it and approaching it from that standpoint would be happy. Like I would have loved if someone would have sent me a text like, what will make you laugh today? That probably would have made me smile and kind of feel good and make me feel seen. And so it's versus like, just the typical, how you doing? Like, I ain't doing good.
Right, exactly. Right.
But I know that people mean well, and for the person that's grieving as well, because nobody was telling me I was just out here mad at everybody. We got to have grace with others as well, because they don't know what to say. They're trying their best. So what I would say for people that are grieving is to speak up when you feel like you need to. You don't have to speak up for every situation because you're going through a lot. And so I don't think that people should feel like, again, that's why I want people to don't feel entitled to get a response, because it's unfair to the person that's grieving. So I don't feel like you have to respond to every single thing, but when you need to respond, feel comfortable enough to express yourself and, say it from a place of love, so that is no kind of mixed signals, but hey, right now I would like some time and some space alone, or it hurts my feelings when you say that you understand how I feel without asking me how I even feel. Try to be very short and to the point, but like express yourself thoroughly and how you feel, because it's okay. Because I know from my own experience, I felt like I couldn't. So I felt silenced with my grieving process, and then I felt silenced with expressing my thoughts to others and like defending myself, or when I needed to like say something to someone, like I felt silenced because I felt like nobody wanted to hear me, or they would take it personal, or things like that. And the space that I'm in now, I don't feel like that. I have to say what I have to say if it's going to make me feel better. And I just make sure that I approach it from love, so that way it doesn't come off wrong. But it can still come off wrong,
Absolutely. So it really sounds like it's grace, space, and authentic communication.
Yeah.
Even if you're saying, I don't know what to say right now, but I just wanted to make sure you were okay.
Yeah. And time.
Mm-hmm.
Grief is long. It's
Mm-hmm.
a long process. So I know for myself, I went back like, months later and I was thanking people who was there for me. I couldn't say it in that moment because I didn't have the words. I was angry. I was processing things, but I went back and was like, thank you for, your kindness during this time, or thank you for sticking by me despite my several emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Absolutely.
thank you for not judging me. I mean, for me, that's my favorite ones. I have some real friends that didn't judge me
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of just let me go through my process. And
That's
I
beautiful.
appreciate that so much.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And going to your group a little bit, I know there's been, of course, an upsurge in deaths with the coronavirus. And are there people in your group that have lost parents to COVID?
Yes. After my first call, my heart was so heavy because it was a really great turnout. And I was taking little notes as everyone was introducing themselves. And on my first call alone, it was 6 people that had lost their parents to COVID. And
Um,
although I'm very aware and I've been aware this
mhm,
entire time because of my own experience, that people have lost their loved ones and not just loved ones, their parents and their children and things like that.
mhm,
Um, I still felt like I wasn't prepared to when they said it out their mouths,
right.
and
Mhm,
having to process and live with that and think about how hard and have to be for them to
right.
have these daily reminders every second of the day.
Yeah.
One of the support group members said, like, every time I put my mask on is a reminder. And it
Wow.
is,
Wow.
so although we have so many similarities, because I'm someone who lost my parents to cancer. So, we have
Mhm,
a lot of people who have lost their parents to cancer. Um, Something like a pandemic, a global pandemic, something that was so unexpected, because,
yeah.
most people feel like that is unexpected anyway.
Right.
Something
Right.
like this, where it was completely unexpected, it's it's very hard to think about how their grief process will be very traumatizing,
Mm,
for a while, because of the complexities of how people treat the pandemic, how people respond to the pandemic, how the government has responded to the pandemic,
mhm,
how they wasn't able, some people, to celebrate their parents maybe in a way that others were able to, with a proper funeral with loved ones. I mean, it's so many complexities with it. So for those people, I would say to join a call, because you would be surrounded around a lot of people who already support you, but who you can
mhm.
connect to in real time, who are also going through the same things, that you're going through. And maybe you can be able to share your experience and find, some connections. But I
Mhm.
think if anybody is listening who hasn't lost a parent or loved one to COVID, I would just say, please be mindful of how you talk about COVID, how you
Mhm.
respond to it, because you don't know what the person to your left or right have experienced or what they're going through or who they have lost. So try to
Absolutely.
be compassionate, and mindful that people are losing lives. This is not about politics, or anything like that. It's just about the fact that people are losing their life, and those people have families who are processing their transition.
Absolutely. And if somebody was interested in joining your support group, how would they go about doing that?
Yes, so they can join on oursanctuary.co,
Mhm.
um, back, /grief.
Mhm.
And when they go to that, it's like a landing page, it's a home page. So they'll be able to see all of the events that's coming on. We offer the, support group every Wednesday. The first and third Wednesday is 6:30 p.m. Central Time. And the second and fourth Wednesday is 8:30 p.m. Central Time. So,
Mhm.
hopefully that allows people to have a variety of time options to choose from. So you'll see the events there. You will see, the RSVP for each event. So you can sign up for the RSVP so you can get notifications. You'll also be able to contact me through the webpage as well, and message us on a Discord. That will also be on the webpage as well, where we can chat in real time, but be mindful that real time may look different for me. Right. All right. We'll be able to also chat outside of Wednesdays. That's what that really means. And you can also, reach me by email and on my social sites. I'll be able to chat in later as well.
That's awesome. That's really good. So you guys have a Discord server where the members are able to connect with each other outside of group.
Yes.
That's cool. That's so awesome. That's
the
great.
Wednesday live, but then the Discord is for, you have those moments where you want to chat. And it's not just me you're chatting with, but other members as well. That's a part of the Healing Sanctuary.
That is so awesome. That's great. What you're doing is just amazing. Let me just say that, because this is a topic, and I can say again, as a therapist, it's a touchy topic that a lot of people don't really want to discuss, or, can feel they're burdening others when they discuss it, could feel uncomfortable when they do. So I think with you offering a resource like this to so many people, especially in the time that we're living in now, is just amazing. So I definitely want to commend you for that.
Thank you. Yes, the goal is to really normalize and take space up in grief. Most people live with grief in silence. And like I said, that I had suicidal thoughts. A lot of people don't make it past, and they can't go to therapist. They've already acted on it. And so the goal is so that people aren't suffering in silence anymore, so that people hopefully don't take their lives, and to help people feel like they can still live a fulfilled life while also living with grief, because grief is complex. It takes a lot of work to feel as if you can live a fulfilled life while also grieving your loved ones, but it's possible. And so hopefully this group serves as a sense of light for others.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. So do you want to share where they can find you on social media?
Yes. So you guys can find me at Finding Her Light on Instagram. So Finding Her Light, all one word on Instagram. Also on YouTube at Finding Her Light. And you can also email me at hello@findingherlight.com. And those are the 3 places where you can reach me for now.
Awesome. That sounds good. And for everyone that is watching and listening, we are going to list all of Precious's information in the description box below, as well as on the Parent Loss Support Group. So be sure to check out the description box to follow Precious. And again, Precious, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on my show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me and for creating opportunities like this so that we do have a voice on platforms where others can connect. So
thank you.
My gratitude always.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it so much.